You are listening to Star Nation's radio network, Communications from Home, on Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to the Sacred Hoop Radio Show with your host, Neshi Lokotz, on Star Nation's radio network.
Bonjour, everyone. Hi, this is Neshi Lokotz. Welcome to Star Nation's Radio Network, and on a beautiful Wednesday night, and we're spending some time with you all tonight, talking about lots of interesting things and passion in the show before us with my Nami, Dana Iwana, and a good friend, Sandy Herrick. Those ladies, they tell it like it is. Two Scorpios doing their thing there. It was a good show. Thank you, ladies. And it was a nice segue into what we're going to be talking tonight about on Sacred Hoop, which is ancestral healing. And I just wanted to say thank you to everybody out in the chat rooms. Thank you for being with us tonight in the Blog Talk Radio chat room and also over at the Facebook chat. We appreciate that. And those who will be listening to the archive shows, we appreciate that. We love our archives. Let me tell you, we use them a lot, both as radio show hosts, and I know that our listeners really enjoy and like the fact that they can download the MP3 and listen to it anytime they want to. Put their headphones on while they're at work and listen to the show. I know several people who do that. So anyway, I wanted to talk about, and actually this is going to be a series for me, for my show on Sacred Hoop. I wanted to bring to the listeners a topic that I think is going to be very important to a lot of us, many of us, on our path, our soul growth. A lot of us have been working very diligently on healing and being able to use our gifts that we came in with and then the skills that we learned while we were here to the maximum, right? To be able to live our lives through that and to learn. And that is something that we're calling ancestral healing. And there's many different ways to do that. There's many modalities. Many paths up the mountain, as they say, in the healing. And tonight I wanted to get started with a good friend of mine, Debra Morrill. Deborah is with us. I can hear you.
Hi, Neshi.
There. Hi. Welcome to the show, Deborah. I just wanted to share with everybody about a little bit about you and why I asked you to be on the show with me. And before we do that, though, Deborah, what I usually do on all of my shows is I set the sacred space for us by calling in the directions.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to do that now. And for our listeners, if you could please do me a favor. Usually I just do the directions and get our sacred space set. But tonight, what I'd like you to do is to actually plant both your feet flat on the floor. Okay. If you're sitting on the floor, you can sit with your legs crossed. That's fine. But if you're sitting in a chair, if you could please put your feet flat on the floor and with your spine as straight as possible when we do this one, because we're going to be calling in our ancestors to be with us tonight. Because in our healing, when we focus on that and get to the root of what we're carrying around with us from our ancestors, we are helping them as well. And so it's a balance of giving and receiving. So as we heal, so do they, but they also will help us identify and to be able to lead us down the path through that healing. So with that, I'm going to be using my drum. Okay, and here we go. Mauna, Earth Maker, Creator of all things, we humbly ask for your presence in our sacred circle here tonight as we have the opportunity and the blessing to be able to share about ancestral healing. And we ask you to please come to be with us tonight. And we ask you to please come. Miigwech, thank you. We call to the spirit of the East, the spirit of air, the spirit of thought. We humbly ask for your presence in our sacred circle here tonight so that we may have balanced thoughts as we share about the aspects and the importance of ancestral healing. And we ask you to please come. Miigwech, thank you. We call to the spirit of the South, the spirit of fire, the spirit of energy. We humbly ask for your presence in our sacred circle here tonight so that we may have balanced energies as we share about and as we begin to remember what it is that we're healing through ancestral healing. And we ask you to please come. Thank you. We call to the spirit of the West, the spirit of water, the spirit of emotion. We humbly ask for your presence in our sacred circle here tonight so that we may have balanced emotions as we share about the healing of ancestral wounds and ancestral drama. And we ask that you please come so that we can embrace those and to recognize them, to clarify them. And we ask you to please come. Miigwech, thank you. We call to the spirit of the North, the spirit of balance, stability, and wisdom, the place of our ancestors. We ask you to please come to be with us tonight in our sacred circle so that we may have balance, to recognize our own wisdom and the wisdom of each other, and to follow, to lean on, to ask for help from our ancestors. With open hearts and open minds so that we are able to heal those things that may be a block or interfere with our soul growth in this current physical life. And we ask you to please come. Miigwech, thank you. Thank you. We also call to Grandmother Earth, Kokmis Kikan, Onchimaka. We ask you to please be with us tonight, to come close so that we can feel your support and your love for us as we share about this thing that we call ancestral healing, that we go so far back that only you really remember the sequencing and the history of all of that. Our grandmother, we ask you to please be here with us to nurture us through this. And we ask you to please come. Miigwech, thank you. Grandfather Sky, Wankantanka, we ask you to please come close to us tonight in our sacred circle, to illuminate our path as we share about ancestral healing, to illuminate our path with the moon, the sun, and the stars. As we begin this part of our journey together, that we may have clarity and to be able to see the path. And we ask you to please come. We also call to our guides, guardians, angels, teachers, allies, our power animals, all of those who work with us for our highest good and the highest good of all, to also please be here with us, to communicate with us, to help us as we begin this journey together on ancestral healing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Miigwech, miigwech, ahau.
And Neshi, if I might add to that,
sure.
I often, whenever I do ancestral healing, I do an invocation of intention.
Okay.
May this healing energy tonight that comes through us and all who are listening ripple out to the ancestors to the current generations and to the generations yet to come. Aho.
Aho. Thank you, Miigwech. Igwin for that, because there's many, including me, that we believe that when we do our own healing, we actually affect our ancestors 7 generations back and our descendants 7 generations forward.
Absolutely.
So that, So what we do is no small thing. It is very soul importance. And so tonight, because like I said, there's many paths up the mountain for this kind of healing, I invited a good friend of mine, Debra Morrill, to be on the show with me. And I wanted to share just a little bit about you, Debra, because I want people to get to know you in Star Nation. And Debra has a BA, and she also is a shamanic healing practice in Prairie du Sac, Wisconsin. That's south of me, about hour and a half, maybe 2 hours south of me. She specializes in ancestral healing, compassionate depossession, and curse unraveling. She teaches classes on a variety of spiritual topics, including a 6-month ancestral healing circle and the popular Energy Essentials for Empaths, a really, really good class for us empaths. She also trains students in shamanic healing techniques for a 2.5-year medicine wheel program. She does have gentle, grounded energy. I know this for a fact. And she creates a safe space for healing. And to learn more about more details about all of that, you can go to DebraMorrill.com, and you can read about all of more of that in detail. But how Debra and I met, so many years ago, Debra contacted me to one is to write an article to interview me. I think you were writing about feng shui at the time, and
I think that's correct.
Yeah, and you interviewed me. And so tonight we get to turn the tables a little bit. I get to interview you. And also when Debra was early in her practice, and how when we're getting our certifications, we need X number of hours in order to be able to demonstrate that we're proficient at what we're doing. And so I was one of the people that raised my hand to be able to help Debra get her training hours in. And so I have been with Debra in a healing session. And so I come to you with somebody who I believe practices her medicine with a good heart. And when I came to this conclusion that talk about passion, that I needed to talk about ancestral healing, because I have started down that path myself, and really wanting to share this information with my listeners and to those people who read my articles and that sort of thing. And when I made that decision, I actually had a soul session with Sandy Herrick. And it was after that session that I made the decision that I was going to do this series for the radio show. And as I sat there and I was writing out, I can't say it's writing. It was more like a mind mapping kind of thing. I was doodling about it. And I was asking my spiritual team about who, from a shamanic point of view, who would be the most appropriate person to come and share their wisdom with the listeners about this. And Debra, your name kept popping up, and I mean, a lot of people would think that, we should have those people who have been around this topic for decades, like a Sandra Ingerman kind of person. And, but, Spirit wants us to be able to really talk about this from a perspective of somebody who is actually daily doing the work. Because because our listeners are going to be really in it, right? And so with that, I thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us tonight, and maybe even for subsequent shows. that
thank you for having me on, and thank you for this beautiful opportunity to spread the message about ancestral healing, because it's so needed in our world these days.
I know, absolutely. And just for those listeners who may not, maybe they're just starting out. They're just starting out, and they're trying to literally get their feet under them, and figure out where to start, how to start learning about this stuff, where to start their healing process. And when we talk about ancestral healing from a shamanic point of view, what does ancestral healing mean? Okay.
Well, this is the example that I often use. You know how back in junior high health class, we learned about genetics and how we learned that through the DNA that comes through us from our mother and from our father, we can inherit certain physical characteristics, such as the color of our eyes, the general shape of our body, the color of our hair, our bone structure, certain physical illnesses we can inherit. So it's not just that those physical energies that can be passed through us through our genetics as well. We can also receive gifts through our DNA. For instance, from a grandmother, we might inherit the love of cooking and nurturing through food. Through a grandfather, maybe a dry sense of humor, or the love of woodworking, or even a certain profession. However, we can also inherit the unfinished business and the unhealed wounds of our ancestors, which explains why things like certain mental illness, certain addictions, certain beliefs even, certain propensity, for instance, domestic violence can travel through families, our relationship to money, pretty much any unfinished business or unhealed wound, dysfunctional communication patterns. Those kind of energies can also become internalized and passed through to us through our DNA. And this is referred to in shamanic healing as healing the red thread. So the red thread would be that inherited legacy. So, ancestral healing, healing the red thread. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I like that phrase. And and just hearing the definition from a shamanic point of view, what is ancestral healing, and just the words you're using, especially when you use the phrase unhealed wounds. And sometimes what happens in our attempts to heal and to work through things, sometimes what happens is that we get those layers, right? When we heal one layer, sometimes down the road a ways, you'll actually come against the same energy or the same kind of trauma or drama that you're healing another layer of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because we, certainly for many of these energies, we have our own personal piece of healing to do as well. But for some of these, there's also an ancestral component. And within ancestral healing, we start to track and look at patterns.
Patterns. That's
patterns.
important.
So that's key. So how about if we work through an example together?
Yeah,
okay?
Let's do that.
So this is an example that I use when I teach about ancestral healing. So back in the late 1930s and early 1940s, here in the U.S., when our country was entering the Great Depression, this actually happened in many families where it was an incredibly stressful time. There was financial poverty. There was high unemployment. And during that time, unfortunately, many men abandoned their families.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, they never. In some cases, they went in search of employment. In some cases, they never came back. And in a situation like that, where the mother of the family now was alone raising her children, and she was in a life and death situation. She was likely in survival mode, where she didn't have time to process her feelings and process her emotions. Every ounce of her energy was trying to provide for her family, to keep her family with fed and clothed. And so what happened is, in many families where this was the case, if she died with the unhealed wounds, the unprocessed emotions, those energies would continue on in the family. It would literally enter the family lineage. Now, how it's carried on in the family depends on the gender of the children and even, for instance, birth order. So what might be some typical ways that boys raised in that family might react? What kind of heavy energy might they take on in a situation like that?
Well, it could be alcoholism. It could be they actually leave their own children, their family, so it becomes a pattern.
It becomes a pattern. Now, also, there can be another way as well. Possibly, for instance, the oldest son in the family, maybe he, was forced at a very young age to become the provider for the family, to go out and get a job. And so maybe there's also maybe a thread of being a workaholic. That's another way. How about the women in the family? How would the daughters and granddaughters, what might be some energies that they might take on from that situation?
I'm thinking about my own family actually. It's the having many partners, having maybe many children with different dads. It's the some didn't even finish high school because now they have self-esteem issues with some of that, and so it goes from one generation to another.
Yes, and there can also be an emotional component. The women might have seen their mother become bitter and resentful and angry, start to hate men. That can be carried on as well. So maybe somewhere down the lineage, maybe some of the granddaughters just don't even want to be in relationships because they've seen the bitter, the anger, the angry, the hatred toward men. Also, they maybe, if they have entered into a relationship, their husbands might leave them too. Their husbands might abandon them as well. It's those patterns repeating, speaking out for healing. I believe it's in an attempt to get healing for that original wound. In shamanism, we always talk about the original wound. So in this case, the original wound would be back with that ancestor, the woman whose husband left her during the Great Depression. That would be the original wound. And now, this is another interesting thing about ancestral healing. Quite often, that original wound gets covered over fairly quickly. So usually within just a generation or two, because it was so painful, because it was such a dark, frightening time, the family members don't feel comfortable talking about it. Ooh, we don't want to talk about that. Grandmother might overhear us and be offended or get angry. So it enters, so now there's this veil of secrecy around it as well. So it's not talked about. And at the same time, we see how it carries an incredible impact on the future generations.
Because it becomes a taboo.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, that's an interesting word too when we're talking about all this. And so, many times, in some of the clients that I see, many times they come to me because they feel like they've bumped up against the wall. They keep hitting the same wall. Everything they try, they can't seem to get through it, around it, or anything like that. And so then we start looking at the patterns. What's really going on here? And many times, don't you agree, Deborah, that when you get to that point in your healing work, when you're really working consciously, sometimes you really do need that other person to come on, that healer to come in to help you to follow that thread back.
Absolutely. Sometimes I've certainly found this to be true in my own personal healing journey. Sometimes those really core wounds, we need to do that work being witnessed by a neutral third party, someone who can track clearly and cleanly and not be swayed by the emotion. Yeah. So with ancestral healing, and you raise another good point too, Neshi, with ancestral healing, the entry point is always the discomfort that's felt by the client. So there's some uncomfortable pattern, some blockage, some fear, some often limiting tribal belief or, family agreement. Sometimes even a curse. Sometimes even soul theft, ancestral soul loss, things like that as well. And that some of that heavier work is best done being held by a practitioner.
Ah, I see. Okay. Now we're getting close to that part of the discussion about the actual healing. And before we actually jump into that one, what I'd like to do is to be able to give our listeners a good understanding, kind of like a good base of what is shamanism and how is it used in healing.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Shamanism is the original form of spirituality practiced by the original people of every continent on Earth. So thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, the original people lived close to nature. They followed the cycles and the seasons, and they took their spirituality from what was around them, this close connection to Mother Earth and Father Sky. And, the birds and the animals and the ancestors and the trees and the plants were their brothers and sisters. And they also believed in an unseen, usually unseen, spirit realm called non-ordinary reality. And through a meditative state called a shamanic journey, usually to some kind of repetitive percussion like a drum beat or a rattle, they could travel in. If they were trained, they could travel into these spirit realms and negotiate with the benevolent ancestors, negotiate with the power animals, with the spirit guides, with the angels, negotiate with these divine compassionate beings to bring healing through for their community, for their clients, for themselves. Now, part of shamanism, and this has implications for ancestral healing. So when we do this healing, when we're traveling into the spirit realms, negotiating with these divine compassionate beings, in the spirit realms, there's a concept called circular time. So here in the physical world, we follow linear time, chronological time, past, present, future. If this happens and this happens, then this will likely result. That's chronological time, linear time. But in the spirit realm, it's circular time, all time happening at once, which explains why in a shamanic journey, in a shamanic healing, we can literally travel back in time and do healing for the original wound in the family. And we talked earlier about healing the ancestors, the current generations, and the generations yet to come.
Because time is because it's circular. It
all exists at once.
It's that sacred hoop.
It is. Oh,
it is.
Yeah. beautiful.
Yeah. You know, and I also want to make sure that our listeners, you know, that one of the things Debra said that I'd like to highlight for you, and she said that the original people of all the continents, which means that all tribal people, because if we go back far enough, we're all tribal people,
Yes.
all had some form of healing that was connected to nature. And
Yes.
in modern days, in modern times, we borrow the word shaman or shamanism from the Samis. That's their language. And so, you know, you might hear a different name used in different cultures that mean the same thing. The bottom line is that they're the healers, and they're able to as travel to those other dimensions, those other spiritual realms, to do as Debra called it, the negotiation, to do the work in those realms on your behalf. And so I just wanted to say that because some people get confused about what's New Age and what's ancient wisdom, right?
Yeah, this is definitely ancient. Yeah.
Yes. This is the application of ancient wisdom and information in modern times. Okay. And the reason why I started with the shamanism piece is because, well, that is the life that I live, and you know, and so why not start at the beginning? When we have a question in the chat room, and Cindy's asking, how do you heal the wound? Like you said, when no one is willing to talk about it or deal with it other than you, how, within the shamanism perspective, how do you even get started? What happens?
Great question. So part of my family heritage is from Sweden, the UK, the United Kingdom, and in that part of the world there was Norse shamanism. And there's a piece of Norse shamanism which is really helpful for ancestral healing. There are divine compassionate beings called the Norns, and these three sisters, by the way, these three sisters show up in many other cultures as well. In some other traditions, they're known as the Fates. So these Norns are the record keepers. These Norns come from an elder race of beings. They were there when all of humanity was created, so the lore has it. And these Norns are record keepers. They keep records as the analogy of weaving a tapestry. So we each have an individual tapestry of our life. We also, every family has a family tapestry where the family information is recorded woven onto this tapestry. And in a very specific healing journey, we can journey with these Norns, these divine beings. We can journey to the sister who works with the energy of the past, and we can say, come, sister, show us what original wound still is having an impact on this family. And she will bring that information, even if it's one of those things that's been forgotten, that hasn't been talked about. She remembers. She's the record keeper. And then we can turn to the sister who works with the energy of the future, who has a knife or a scissors, and we can entreat her to cut that dysfunctional pattern, that original wound, out of the family tapestry, and then to release that original wound as well as the red thread that's following through the family lineage. She will release that for us. Then we can turn to, again, the sister of the past is also the spinner. We can ask her to spin new fibers, new positive energies to be woven into the family tapestry. And then with those positive energies, love, compassion, trust, groundedness, balance, those kind of positive energies. The sister who is the sister who works with the energies of the present is a weaver. She'll now weave those new positive energies into that opening that was created on the family tapestry. And then we invite that healed energy to flow out again to the ancestors, to the current generations, and to the generations yet to come. Now, here is the really cool part.
Yeah.
These Norns and this tapestry that they're weaving on and working on, there's uncanny resemblance to the DNA.
Ah.
So with this method of ancestral healing, we're actually, it's said metaphysically, to be healing the DNA.
So you really are getting to the root, the blood and bones of it, to alter. Do we get to keep the life lessons around those? Because obviously the ancestor went through it to learn something. Do we get to keep that life lesson in the DNA? We can ask that, right?
Oh, absolutely, yes. We would definitely carry the benefit of that, and it's not like we're erasing it and pretending that it never happened. We're learning and growing from it and moving forward. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm just kind of tapping into our listeners here, and especially the people in the chat rooms, and I can feel the whirling, the oh my gosh kind of stuff. It's like, and so, in fact, Cindy is adding to her comment. She said, "I've tried many things, even more so myself, because I don't get anywhere with family members, and so trying to heal it in the present, in that linear time, in the present. All you can really do is you have the ability to affect your own healing. You have no control or responsibility, for that matter, for someone else's healing. But with ancestral healing, what we're doing is we're looking into where did this all start? Where did this pattern begin?
Right.
And being able to go into the ancestral lineage and to locate what that is.
Absolutely.
And
we're doing this in sacred space. We're doing this in sacred space with, sometimes amazing things happen. Departed ancestors will come through, and they'll share the story. I actually had one last week like that, and I received permission from my client to share the story anonymously without names.
Oh,
would that
really?
be helpful? Would you like to hear a story?
Yes,
okay.
We would love to hear it. Thank you.
Okay. So, beautiful man, client, beautiful man, beautiful soul. He's been married 4 times. Very open-hearted, but wasn't able to find that deep emotional connection that he was looking for in his relationships. And he comes from an Italian family. His mother came here at age 18 from Italy. And then on his paternal lineage, his grandparents came here from the same small town in Italy. And so, we were tracking that this is ancestral. And so we created sacred space, much like you created sacred space earlier, calling to the benevolent ancestors to come through to help us, to bring wisdom about what this was. And his grandmother came through, and it was like she was literally standing in the room with us. And her energy was so strong, and she was so ready to speak on behalf of the ancestors and on behalf of this family. And she shared with us that it was a history of arranged marriages in this family was part of the wound. And that his mother, in fact, was sent to America to marry this man who had family roots from her hometown in Italy. So, you know, even his parents had an arranged marriage. And this grandmother showed me on the family tapestry the heartbreak that was carried in this family tapestry, the lack of freedom, the lack of following their passion, the lack of being open-hearted. And then there was another piece happening as well. So that was the original wound in the family, was this family agreement that they were going to be part of this legacy of arranged marriages. Now, another thing that was also going on in this family is that my client explained that in his family, anyway, it was a very patriarchal family, and the women, for the most part, now this grandmother was an exception, but the women, for the most part, were expected to just go along with what the men decided. So the women, to some degree, felt powerless as well. So at the same time that this heartbreak is going on, the women in this family, the only power that they had was whenever they were unhappy about something, they cursed that person they were unhappy with. So, and then with the curses, what had happened was there was a lot of repeating family names where sons being named after grandfathers, daughters being named after grandmothers. And now, so the women in the family were sometimes cursing their own husbands. Well, their grandson, for instance, if the grandson was also named after the husband, you know, a piece of that, we know that when we're named after ancestors, that can also be a burden. Yep. There can be also an energetic legacy passed on from family names. So that was just also kind of upping the ante and all of this cursing going on, that there was like collateral damage, if you will, like, you know, energy spilling over onto other family members. So the grandmother came through in a really strong way and stood up and said, it's time for this to stop. And, you know, we all want healing from this. You know, it's time. And the Norns came through and did this beautiful, now, you know, they're spinners and weavers who work on tapestries. They're really good at unraveling curses, for instance. So first of all, we unraveled the agreement around arranged marriages. We unraveled some of the heartbreak. We unraveled these curses. We unraveled the inherited packets of energy based on family naming. And then grandmother said, there has been ancestral soul loss in this family because of this. There's literally the ability to feel, to be open-hearted, to follow one's passions, to have close, emotional, healthy relationships. This is what's missing. So the Norns, along with the benevolent ancestors, helped us gather up that missing ancestral soul essence, do healing for it. And that was interesting, too, because the family totem I was shown in the journey was dolphin. They lived in a seaside village, and the dolphins and the mer people, the mermaids and the mermen, came and healed this family, this ancestral energy. Then that got brought back to the client and to the family tapestry, and it was a beautiful, powerful healing that rippled out to everybody. Wow.
Thank you for sharing that, and and when the next time you speak with your client, and would you thank him, that person, for us, for allowing you to share that story, because it's a very powerful story, and
Absolutely.
one that is going to be very helpful to our listeners, because I'm sure that they, it raised emotions and memories. And for me, when you mentioned names, family names,
Mm-hmm.
In my family, we when we receive our native name, our spirit name, we use our ancestral names.
Mm-hmm.
So, they have to be gone. They have to walk on for at least a year before we can reuse their name. And so when we select a name for that new baby or the child receiving the name, and when we do the naming, we share about that person, that ancestor, what they were like, and when they lived, and who they were married to, and that sort of thing, where they are in the family tree. And so literally this next generation is carrying their memory of that ancestor. So if they have any drama that they had, we're perpetuating it through the name. Now,
absolutely.
It's a good.
And if that ancestor wasn't universally loved, if there are members of the family that, for instance, might be projecting onto that ancestor, when in the act of them projecting, something unpleasant or unhelpful, again, that spill over onto the namesake as well.
Yeah. All right. And the other thing that jumped into my head, Deborah, is what if you don't know your ancestral line? Because many times, whether it's through adoption or, especially in the United States, if you go back far enough, if you're African American, you may not know who your ancestors are because of the slave trade, or even the Irish slave trade. You may not know.
Absolutely. It's amazing how many clients who come for ancestral healing don't know much about their families. That is fairly common. And with this method of journeying into the spirit realm, invoking the assistance of the divine compassionate beings, the norns, the helping ancestors themselves, some of these stories can start to come out, can start to work their way to the surface for healing.
So you don't necessarily have to know who your ancestors are, but what you need to do is to look for patterns of we'll call it dysfunction.
As far back as you can track, and maybe that's just you, parent, grandparent. Maybe it's just you. In the case of adoption, and if there's a strong energy that you're not able to make headway on doing your own personal work from this lifetime, then I would definitely advise seeking some ancestral healing, just to explore the possibility. Yeah. And science is actually finding out, for instance, that fear and trauma, science now knows that the fear and trauma that our ancestor mothers experienced, that fear and trauma enters the mitochondrial DNA, which is passed through the mother line. So we may be carrying the fear and the anxiety and the trauma of our ancestor mothers, and again, not necessarily know why.
Yeah,
we feel the way we do.
And it's actually a two-way street. We're carrying their trauma or drama, but we're also carrying their wisdom as well.
Absolutely, their wisdom and their hopes and their dreams too.
All right, so two things just on that one statement, Deborah, is that one is that now the time that the energy field in which we live in these modern times, we all know that we are living in a time when the sacred or divine feminine is coming forward, right?
Yeah.
And so now is the time to really start looking at healing that matriarchal line, because it's even hard in most cultures to follow who your ancestors are on the matriarchal, because even if they came from a culture that had written language, many times the female names weren't entered in any books,
right,
any history. Even in the marriage licenses that were recorded, many times their names weren't even used because they were seen as possessions, like a piece of furniture. Yeah. So now is the time to really start healing that maternal line, because the energy is supportive of it.
Absolutely.
And the other thing that popped into my head, Deborah, is like, oh, well, darn it, this is the time when we say that, oh, sure, blame it on the mom. And when anybody's going into therapy, especially if it's talk therapy or Freudian, they always want to know about your relationship with your parents and your mother. So
here's another piece of reality from shamanic healing. When the mother in the family heals, everybody heals. That's another piece of reality and another piece of beauty as well. And time and again, here's something that I've taken away from the ancestral healing work that I've helped space for with clients. The pain, I've seen time and time again, the pain which causes us to close our hearts, if unhealed, that pain becomes the wound that passes to the next generations. So it's really up to us to do our work and keep our hearts open.
Yeah, and just from a personal experience, is that one of the patterns in my family is heart conditions, whether it's heart attacks or like with my mom, she has had heart failure, literally a broken heart, and having to have the pacemaker put in, and so that's one of the ancestral patterns in my family, and it's one of the patterns that I started working on years ago to say where is this, because it's just not my mom. It was her sisters. It's her dad. Her aunt. And she could trace it back a few generations that they had heart issues. So that's just an example of what ancestral patterns could look like. Heart conditions, broken hearts.
Absolutely broken hearts. One of I'm thinking back a couple of other examples of patterns in a family that I know, fairly large family, 8 children I think in that family. The sons and daughters, the sons of the family. There was that whole generation of the nephews in that family. Sometime between the ages of 17, 18, 19, 20, that kind of young adulthood age, every one of those nephews and sons had some kind of head injury or head trauma. Even something like that, even an injury can repeat. Another friend that I know, she talked about an aunt and uncle that she had, again, another large family, and in that family lineage, all of the women, all of the daughters in the family had early unplanned pregnancy, like when they were 16. And they could trace back, several generations and see the strong pattern of teenage pregnancy. So, patterns that, we might not even recognize until we really start to take a closer look.
Right.
Poverty.
Well, we only have a couple. We only have a couple of minutes left, but I wanted to fit this in because, and I don't know if we can answer it in just in a minute or so. Is what's the difference between ancestral trauma, ancestral healing, and karma? Are they the same?
Oh well, in one viewpoint would say that they might be the same because, karma is that idea of balance, seeking balance.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So by that definition, ancestral healing, that wound is attempting to come out into the light to restore balance to the family. So they're actually somewhat similar. And also, for those of us who practice this form of spirituality, for those of us who are on our personal healing path, many of us have part of our sacred contract for this lifetime is a calling to do this work, to clean this up for future generations.
So it depends on the perspective. It could be seen as something similar, at least.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. Well, let me tell you, we covered a lot of ground tonight, and it is something I think that we're going to come back and visit again, when you're available. And
I would love to.
Because, there's also another piece that I want to talk about at some point, and that is something that you're very knowledgeable about, and it's one of your passions, and compassions, I should say, and that's depossession. And,
I would love to talk about that.
Yeah, that's some work that you and I both, we have a lot of experience in. So we'll have you back and we'll talk about that one too. But for the listeners, you can reach Debra at DebraMorrill.com. That's DebraMorrill.com. If you'd like to find out a little bit more about her, and if you'd like her to help you with your ancestral healing, that's what tonight was all about. So with that, Debra, thank you so much, and we'll see you. We'll hear from you again, I am sure.
Thank you.
We're going to have you back.
Neshi. Thank you very much. Thank you, Spirit.
And thank you, definitely, for the ancestors for being with us tonight. And thank you for our listeners. Thank you for joining us tonight. And we'll be back again next month with Sacred Hoop. Let's see, our next show is the first Wednesday of the month, and so we'll have another topic of ancestral healing for you. Okay? Good night, everybody. Thank you, Lily, for producing. Good night, everyone.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the Sacred Hoop Radio Show with Neshi Lokotz. On Star Nations Radio Network.